Hello, welcome to my guide on manpower for EU4 after the Austria update. I decided to make this update after finding that my manpower was more plentiful after the Austria update, and then going online and asking if anyone had noticed a similar phenomenon, and no one seemed to, and that was a bit disappointing, and it just sounded sad. So I thought I'd put together a rambling guide of sorts just to outline what I'd found. But I don't want to leave new players out in the cold, so I'm actually just going to go over the basics of manpower in EU4 and then work on, well, go over what has changed. So for advanced players, please bear with me. I'll get to the changes eventually, but I just want everyone to more or less understand the same thing before I get to the meat of the actual guide. So, manpower. Manpower is what your armies need. Their armies are made of people. And your manpower pool is what your armies draw on whenever they're raising new regiments or reinforcing damaged regiments. Every country has a base manpower pool of 10,000. My base manpower pool is significantly more than that, but if you look at the tooltip, you'll see that base value plus 10,000, more or less at the top, the top line of green text. And then you get from provinces and modifiers and all the rest of it. We've got to ignore that just for now. The 10,000 is what I'm mentioning. So the 10,000 is what you start at, and then you get plus 250 for each level of military development a province has. So I've just gone to Goslar, which is a very small one province country, one province kingdom. It might be a free state. Yeah, it's a free city. But it has 6 base manpower, each of which gives you 250 manpower, and together will give you 1,500. Now that's the base manpower, and base manpower gets multiplied by various things to become larger. So depending on the multipliers, a province can provide more than its base manpower, and it usually does. And that's sort of how countries, kingdoms, nations often sort of punch above their weight a little bit when it comes to manpower. And part of the game is just sort of taking these base statistics and then multiplying them to your advantage. And that's effectively what this guide is going to be about. But, so yeah, 10,000 soldiers or reserve soldiers, then plus base manpower from provinces, and that's your sort of basics. Now, provinces can receive bonuses depending on the buildings in them, and nations can get bonuses for all their provinces depending on their national ideas, of all the ideas groups they've adopted, and then there's sort of an intermediate level, which is states, and states, or sometimes referred to as areas, are groups of provinces. So you can see 4 here inside the Matzovia area or state. So there you go. And there are bonuses applied on a state or area basis as well. So talking about manpower, the main bonus for manpower, let's go to Smolensk here. It's my favorite choice. Smolensk is also a state, but we're going to talk about the province. Smolensk has training fields, and training fields give you a plus 100% manpower modifier, local manpower modifier, only for that province. So this means that whatever the base manpower is, this province actually contributes twice as much to the national total. So far, so good. The training fields are an advanced building. There's an earlier version called barracks, which is just 50% bonus. Okay. So that's the basic building for manpower. The sort of ideas, the national ideas, the things that cover your entire kingdom or nation, the 2 main ideas that provide bonuses for manpower are the quantity ideas and the aristocratic ideas. I've chosen the aristocratic ideas here. A lot of people choose the quantity ideas. For me right now, aristocratic is great, and they're particularly good for Poland for different reasons. But, so, quantity ideas, just going back to that for now, quantity ideas provide a 50% bonus to manpower in all provinces as the first idea of the group. So, you know, you have 7 ideas here. The first idea in aristocratic ideas is noble knights. The first idea in quantity ideas is levy en masse, and that's a 50% bonus. Right. Aristocratic ideas is less effective. It has the idea of serfdom as the 4th idea, a little way through, and it only provides 33%. It's good enough for me. But a lot of people swear by quantity ideas because they really love the plus 50% manpower. And that's perfectly good. However, you don't have to take it. Going to states, the intermediate area, not quite as big as a country, not quite as small as a province. States have 2 bonuses that can be applied that affect all the provinces within the state. And those 2 bonuses are having a level 3 inland center of trade, which gives you a plus 33% bonus to local manpower for each of the provinces, and having an increased edict, an edict called increased recruitment, which gives you a plus 25% recruitment, local manpower bonus. So Smolensk actually has a World Trade Center, a level 3 inland center of trade, and as you can see the bonuses here, it has a local development cost of minus 10%. It's easier to develop provinces in there, in the state, and it's also giving you that plus 33% manpower modifier. If I go to the state interface here, you can see an edict I've implemented. Edicts are actually quite static. It takes a while to put one in and take one out. If you put one in, it has to last for at least a year. So they're, you know, then you're not encouraged to swap them out all over the place, you know, every other day. No, they have to stay for a while. But this edict gives you the plus 25%. So all the provinces here are effectively 58% more effective when it comes to manpower. Well, 58% compared to the base manpower. Because when I go to the Smolensk province, you will see that I've stacked a lot of bonuses in these provinces here. So just never mind the total for now. Just look at the manpower efficiency. So you've got the base efficiency of 4,250. You've got soldiers' households adding 1,500 on top, and you've got manpower efficiency, and that's the multiplier of the base and the soldiers' households together. I'm multiplying it by 4, which is pretty good. I don't usually get it that high. So this is decent. If I'd taken quantity ideas, it would be a little bit higher, but it's still, you know, only by about 17% higher. So it's still quite respectable, I think. Anywho, that's the basics. Have your base manpower and then and multiply it with your multipliers. And the multipliers are additive. You add the multipliers together. So unfortunately, you can't get 100% and then add another 100% and then multiply it by another 100%. No, it's a well, multiply it again and again and again. No. Unfortunately, it's just, you know, add another 100%, add another 100%, add another 100%. After that, what do you have? 300%. So yeah, but you can still have fun with it. Anyway, so now that we've covered the basics, let's just talk about the changes in the Austria update. I mentioned that I found myself actually having more manpower than I had before, which was pleasant. But not everyone noticed it. So the first change is the change to Defender of the Faith. Initially, Defender of the Faith just gave you prestige and a bit of more morale, but it didn't really matter how much faith you were defending. Now, Defender of the Faith scales for the number of nations, independent kingdoms that you are defending. Once you're defending 20 kingdoms or nations, you now get the bonus you see at the bottom of this tooltip. The bonus I'm mentioning is manpower in true faith provinces. Now, as a responsible ruler, you will of course persuaded all of your subjects to follow the true faith. And if they weren't, of course, you've probably persuaded them to leave or maybe made them into kindling. Because this is that kind of game. But it's a really good bonus. You can get it right at the beginning. Becoming Defender of the Faith costs 500 gold, so you actually have to be quite wealthy, and you need a certain amount of prestige to get it. preferably more than anyone else. So yeah, okay, there are limitations, but it's still gettable by some countries from quite early on. So that's one way to get manpower. There are others, and we'll move to that next. The second way is actually really more powerful, and that's because of the new estates. The new estates have completely changed how your nobility, your clergy, your merchants interact with you. You do it primarily by giving them land or taking their land away, and by giving them privileges. And privileges are these things along here. The nobility, there's a particular nobility privilege, not golden liberty, called increased levies. Golden liberty that I'm highlighting here is actually the Polish version, which is slightly different. So I'm just going to describe increased levies, which is the nobility privilege that increases manpower. What it does is it gives you a bonus to manpower in every province you own according to the percentage of land the nobility own in your kingdom. You can see the percentage of land the nobility own in this little pie chart here. In the case of this kingdom here, most of the land is owned by the crown, 84.755%, and everything else is Cossacks, which isn't that much because most of it's controlled by the domineering crown. But anyway, what you'd want to do if you were going to give grant the privilege increased levies is you'd grant the privilege and you'd make sure that the amount of land the nobility control was quite high, maybe as high as 50% or something like that. What this would do, of course, is because the bonus is exactly proportional to the amount of land the nobility own, you get a 50% bonus to manpower in all your provinces. Kind of handy. Unfortunately, it comes with a particular cost, and that cost is you lose a quarter of the percent of the land the nobility own in tax revenue. So you'd have a 12.5% penalty to tax revenue from every province. Tax revenue isn't the be-all and end-all in this game, but it's something, and you might miss it. So it's not great. You're definitely giving and taking. But manpower is pretty scarce sometimes, and having a large pool of manpower is very useful in a long war. And this is a bonus you can get right from the start as well. Almost right from the start anyway. And you can control how much land your various estates have. Not very easily, but you can control it. So I thoroughly recommend this as I thoroughly recommend increased levies. And if you want to get the Polish version, Golden Liberty for the Schlachter, I recommend it as well. It gives you a flat 50% bonus. It doesn't have a tax penalty. It just means you can't seize land from your Schlachter, from your nobility. And that's fine because I develop provinces anyway. That's sort of how I like to play. And when you develop provinces, you actually slowly erode the amount of land that each of your states has, and land sort of effectively returns to the crown. And so I've done it enough that the crown owns a huge amount of land. That was a sort of gradual effect over playing the game, but yeah, I still got my 50% manpower bonus, and I'm very happy with it. It does reduce my absolutism. Yeah, it's a cost, but I'm willing to pay it. Now, there is a real gamey thing, a real gamey exploit that exists with the increased levies and the government reforms that were introduced with Rule Britannia. And I'm just going to show you that sort of, well, it's an exploit, but you could also argue it's not an exploit. It really depends on how you look at it. Because the increased levies privilege allows you to trade tax revenue for manpower. But there's actually, and it allows it to do it at, a 1-to-4 ratio. But there's but the government reforms allow you to do the same thing at a different ratio, and you can exploit the different ratios. So let's go into government reforms and look at noble privileges. You start with tier 1 reforms, and then tier 2 reforms come in fairly early on in the game, quite close. So, and you have to choose between curtail noble privileges and strengthen noble privileges. And this happens if you're a monarchy. If you're a republic, you're going to have or a theocracy, you're going to have different government reforms. And I think there's some other ones that are different again if you're a horde and things like that. But monarchies are actually the most common government type in the game anyway, so there's a good chance you'll be looking at what I'm looking at here. Now, the noble privileges reforms makes you do a trade-off, much like the increased levies privilege. But you have to, yeah, I'm using the word privilege all the time, but the game's forcing me to. It's what it calls itself, what it calls these sort of aspects of the game. But you're trading off between 15% manpower modifier and national tax modifier. And so now the ratio you're trading is 1.5 manpower percent or 10% tax. So it's a very different ratio. It's not 1 to 4, it's 1 to 1.5. So what you do is you take the 10% tax modifier from this one, because you get the most tax for the cheapest amount of manpower here. But when it comes to increased levies, you take the manpower rather than the national tax. And this lets you effectively balance out the penalty from the increased levies and still get your large manpower pool. I think this will probably be nerfed because the ratios are just out of whack, but it's kind of a nice little trick for now. I recommend everyone takes it, unless they really, really don't care about tax, and therefore, you know, take both. Take the 15%, increase your privileges, and take the 15% manpower on top. But I'll also mention that the curtail noble privileges reduces the influence of your nobility, Schlachter in this case, by 10% as well. And if you're increasing the amount of land that your nobility owned, they will have a lot of influence in your kingdom. So this curtail noble privileges is doubly useful because it means that that influence doesn't get heinously large, like it might otherwise. And you can, you won't have any trouble with, you know, some kind of national disaster later on because your nobles are getting in the way. So yeah, highly recommended. And really useful, as I said earlier, if you need manpower early in the game. Now, the third change and the last major change I'm going to go over is soldiers' households. Soldiers' households are manufactories that provide 750 manpower or 1500 manpower, depending on what the province makes. And the goods that are required to give you the 1,500 manpower are grain, fish, livestock, and wine. Now because these are effectively base increases, they multiply with they're affected by all the multipliers that you can add to a province. You know, all the province multipliers, all the state or area multipliers, and all the national multipliers. So being able to build a building that gives you more base manpower is very strong. And because it's it can be multiplied by state and province, you have to take both. It pays to take both factors into account when you're going to build them. So, if you've been listening, you'll have remembered that the state bonuses you get for manpower are based on a level 3 center of trade and an edict. So when you're going for provinces to build these soldier households, you want a province that gives you the right good, one of these, you know, food goods, grain, fish, livestock, so forth, and you want that province to be in a state with a center of trade that you can upgrade to level 3. And that's sort of the principle I'm using most of the time when I'm building soldier households. At least when I'm where do I build them first? I build them first in places which fit those two criteria. And so Kiev, the West Dnieper state, fits that. It has an inland center of trade, and Kiev happens to have grain. So I build a soldier household, and I'm also getting 33% extra. So I'm I'm getting another 500 men from that building. Kind of handy. Of course, I'm building the training fields, so I get another 100%. And I've also got the increased manpower modifier, so I've got the extra 25%. And as a result, I'm just getting more for it. So, more bang for your buck. These are the little efficiency tricks that can get you quite a lot. Of course, the funny thing is that this has a bit of a snowball effect. You build up the base manpower and you're encouraged to stack the modifiers on top. But once you've stacked the modifiers, you might as well continue to build up the base again. So once you've built your soldier's household, it kind of makes sense to build a university too, which reduces the development cost. And this lets you it reduces the cost of raising the development a little bit. And as you can see, I've raised the development quite a bit, and now this province is providing 20,000 men to by itself. And that's quite a lot of men. If you start off playing as a sort of medium, moderate sized power, you can have an entire manpower pool equivalent to about 20,000 men. So having it in one province is kind of insane. And then, when you get to the state level, suddenly you have states providing 80,000 manpower, which is, again, very respectable. And in this particular run through, I've kind of built that up to rather ridiculous proportions because I've got over 1 million men in my manpower reserve. So, yeah, no one's heard of Russia here. Yeah, it's the Polish steamroller, not the Russian one. So yeah, there's kind of like now you're getting armies from states, which is kind of cute because it's rather Prussian. If you Google an army with a state and perhaps if you Google army with a state, you'll probably find Prussia coming up in your Google search, because it's a little bit of a famous quote. Prussia had so many soldiers, devoted itself to so much of the army. They just said, yeah, Prussia's not a country with an army, it's an army with a country, or an army with a state. And because of the way things are built here, yes, I am now producing armies from just individual states. So that's how you get your recruitment grounds. And very nice recruitment grounds. It also helps if you're going to build these provinces that you have town halls or courthouses, because they reduce the governing cost. Governing cost increases with the amount of development, and because you've increased the military development of province, the overall development is quite high. Reduce the cost on your government. Build a courthouse. Conscription centers are nice just because occasionally you get events that add more development, add more manpower to provinces with conscription centers, so I add them in as well just in case. And that's sort of like the big trick. Well, one of the big tricks anyway. And it'll certainly hopefully help these people, well, some of the people who, haven't noticed that you can actually get a lot more manpower now and potentially fight longer, bloodier, God help you, wars. And it's fun. So there's also there are particular states that are best for this because it relies on sort of preset geography. You need provinces with the right goods, and states with an inland center of trade, and potentially easy to develop land as well if you're going to actually build up the provinces a little bit to take advantage of all the stacked modifiers. So in some order, I think the best states for building up, these great big recruiting grounds are Transdanubia, with Pest as the center of trade. It has pretty much the right goods. It has excellent geography, farmlands mostly. The one province that doesn't have the right goods, it has coal, actually has a food group at the beginning, so it's not a problem. Just at the end it turns into coal, which unfortunately is hard to stop if you're going to develop the province. Wallachia is nearly as good as well. It has almost all the right goods. It has one with copper. Again, the land is very easy to develop. West Dnieper is again a very good one. It only has 4 provinces rather than 5 in the state, but all the goods are pretty decent. The land is fairly developable as well. Smolensk I've been using as my example. It's okay. It's only 3 out of 4 now, so not quite as good. One of the provinces has cloth instead of an agricultural product. Still not bad. Lombardy, I won't go into Lombardy, but Lombardy has an inland centre of trade again. Some of the provinces have what you need, though I do think they change a little bit over time. I think perhaps early in the game they're better than they are at the end of the game. Yeah, I've got a bit of... yeah, it starts off, it's only 1 by the end, but at the beginning it's much better. Florence has wine and cows, and that's actually kind of handy. So if you can, Tuscany is a good one. Orléans is the only really good one in France, I think. It's only got 3 provinces in the state, but they're all agricultural good producers. The terrain isn't perfect, but it's what there is. There just don't seem to be quite so many good states within Western Europe. It seems to be mostly concentrated in East, where everything's flat. They produce lots of grain, lots of cows, and you know, not in Russia, not in like Eastern Russia, but you know, Ukrainian sort of Eastern Balkan-ish type area. It's pretty decent. You can, and the result is you can get some pretty ridiculous stuff. Ridiculous manpower. I think I'm getting like 80,000 manpower from various states, which is lovely. You can use a similar trick with impressment offices. Impressment offices are the sailor equivalent of soldier households. They provide 250 men if you're producing the wrong good, but 500 sailors, I should say, if you're producing the right good. And here is one of my provinces that produces the right good and has impressment offices producing 500 sailors. Now, you can't do exactly the same trick with impressment offices as with soldier households, just because there is no edict that improves sailors from your provinces. However, I'll go to my 3rd level world port here, a 3rd level coastal center of trade. You will notice that level 3 coastal centers of trade have a 100% bonus to local sailors from each province in the area. The bonus from centers of trade is even better. You only get sailors from coastal provinces, and those provinces need to produce the right thing, but the bonus is better. I haven't looked around a lot for the best areas or states for recruiting sailors, but they have to be out there. I just haven't put the time in. But except for, I mean, one that sort of fairly obvious to me is Western Norway, Vestlandet, because it has a coastal center of trade. And if you look at as a coastal center of trade, it has, 4 provinces. And if you look at the goods it produces, fish, naval supplies, and fish again. And those are the right goods. The particular goods, I don't think I've gone over them, are salt, fish, naval supplies, and tropical wood. So 3 out of 4 ain't bad. The only sad thing about this particular state is that the terrain is bad. It's highlands in every single province, which isn't ideal. However, if you really want the sailors, that's where you go. You build yourself a university, and once you've got a level 3 center of trade, which will again reduce the development costs a bit again for every province, it'll ameliorate the local development cost a bit. But yes, it will never be as good as farmland. I mean, nothing's perfect. Some of the Norway might be okay. North Jutland, yeah, but it only gives you 2 out of 4, which is not really what you want. But you can try some of the other places around here, other provinces. Yeah, yeah. It's mostly it's a bit spotty. Just looking at Pomerania might be decent. Anyway, I'm going to stop looking. you can see this tactic I'm getting at. So just to recap, there's the just going back to manpower, to recap, there's the Defender of the Faith, which gives you a 20% manpower bonus. You can get that early on. There's the Nobility Estate Increased Levies. You can get that early on, and you can exploit a little bit by using the monarchy government reforms to balance out your tax penalty. You can also, from about one third to 2/5 into the game, start building soldier households, and stacking the multiplying the increase with lots of bonuses to really take advantage of that as well. And so now I think in this game you probably have like almost too much manpower potentially. I don't know if they might rein it in or not, but maybe they just want to say, have at it, go nuts. You can definitely swallow a few defeats, a few really costly, nasty losses, stack wipes, armies destroyed this way. Anyway, I hope you found this guide interesting. Please like if you found it useful, dislike if something was terribly wrong, comment if you want to contribute something, maybe consider subscribing. That's it for now. Cheers for watching.